There is a chain almost no one pictures when they quote Philippians 4:13. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. You've seen it on a coffee mug, stitched onto a gym towel, read out before a hard exam, posted over a photo of somebody crossing a finish line. Now picture the hand that first wrote it. A man on a cold stone iron on his wrist, a soldier a few feet away, who is in a real sense chained to him. The light is bad, the food is worse, and there is no release date anywhere on the calendar. And in that room, no promotion coming, no healing scheduled, no comeback in sight. Those are the words he chooses. Almost every time we quote it, we aim it in a direction the man in chains never pointed it. Here's the strange part. The real meaning isn't smaller than the popular one. It's bigger. It just runs the opposite way. The popular reading treats this verse as fuel. Strength to win. Strength to push through. Strength to finally land the thing on the prayer list. Not a promise of presence, a promise of performance. And it works beautifully, right up until the answer is no. But Paul isn't talking about winning, not the promotion, not the comeback, not the chain falling off. He says something that's easy to read straight past. He learned this. He learned a kind of strength, and that's the word that should stop us. What strength does a man learn in a cell? Nobody learns ambition in chains. Nobody learns victory there. So what exactly did he learn? And why does the answer decide whether this verse holds the day your own strength finally runs out? To see it, we have to start where he was sitting, because where he was changes everything. Start with the cell, not the clean institutional kind. A first-century Roman confinement could mean a chain bolted to a guard, stone walls, thin food, and a legal outcome no one could promise. Paul isn't in a study with good light and a full shelf. He's in custody, writing to people he loves. Those people are the church at Philippi, one of the first he ever planted in Europe. He'd been beaten there once, thrown into a different jail, and a church was born in the middle of that mess. Years later, they hear he's in chains again, and they send him a gift. This whole letter is, in part, a thank you note. A thank you note written by a man who may not walk out alive. Now hold that next to the coffee mug version of the verse. The popular reading treats Philippians 4:13 as fuel. Strength to hit the target, strength to close the deal, win the game, beat the diagnosis, and get the yes. It's a verse for the highlight reel. And on the highlight reel, it preaches beautifully. But watch what happens when life stops cooperating. The promotion doesn't come. The scan comes back wrong. The marriage doesn't recover. The prayer gets a flat, silent no. If the verse were a promise that effort plus faith equals victory, then the person sitting in the wreckage is left with one of two ugly conclusions. Either God didn't show up, or their faith wasn't strong enough. The verse that was supposed to carry them turns into the verse that accuses them. So the popular reading has a fatal flaw. It works everywhere except the one place anyone actually reaches for this verse, the hard place. Hold that thought. It matters more than it looks. Because Paul tells us in the very sentence right before verse 13 exactly what he's talking about, and it isn't winning. He says he has learned, in whatever situation he's in, to be content. He knows what it is to be brought low and what it is to have plenty, well-fed and hungry, abundance and need, and in both of them, the full one and the empty one, he keeps landing in the same place, content. That's the word the mug always erases, not victorious, not unstoppable, not blessed and highly favored, content. So when Paul finally says, I can do all things, the all things aren't trophies. They're the conditions he just named. Being low, going without, sitting in a cell with the door still locked. He's saying he can stand inside any of it. And that's a far stranger claim than the poster ever made. Because contentment in a cell is not natural. Nobody drifts into peace in chains. Nobody relaxes their way into joy with the door still locked. It has to come from somewhere that isn't the circumstances and isn't, it turns out, sheer willpower either. So where does it come from? That's the real question this verse has been waiting to answer. Picture someone white-knuckling it, jaw clenched, trying to force themselves to feel calm, trying to manufacture peace by sheer effort, the way you'd try to fall asleep by concentrating harder. It never works. Peace doesn't come on command, and neither does contentment. Anyone who's tried to grit their way into joy already knows that. So if Paul didn't grind his way into contentment, and he didn't get it from his circumstances, where did it come from? He'd already told them. A few chapters earlier in the same letter, Paul says it plainly. It is God who works in you, both the wanting and the doing. not God who waits for you to get started. God who works in you. The verb points inward. The power runs from the inside out. And Paul is more specific elsewhere about how that inward work happens. The same risen Christ named in this verse doesn't strengthen his people from a throne far away. He strengthens them by his Spirit living on the inside. So putting the Spirit at the center here isn't swapping out the verse. It's reading Christ who strengthens me, the way Paul reads it everywhere else. Christ present and at work within, by the Spirit he pours into his people. And Scripture has a name for the kind of thing that Spirit produces. In Galatians, Paul lists what the Spirit grows in a life: love, joy, peace, patience, the steady inner climate that doesn't rise and fall with the weather outside. He doesn't call them achievements. He calls them fruit. The Greek word is karpos, fruit, something grown, not forced. And notice what sits right there on the list: peace. Contentment is what grows up out of that peace, slowly, given time. You don't will an apple into existence. You don't strain a vineyard into season. A branch doesn't produce by trying. It produces by abiding, by staying joined to something with far more life than itself. That reorganizes the whole verse. Contentment isn't a muscle Paul flexed. It's the fruit the Spirit grew in him. And that's why he says he learned it, because fruit takes seasons. It ripens through the full table and the empty one, through the years of plenty and the long stretches of hunger. Paul didn't get content in a flash. He got there the slow way, the only way fruit ever comes, by staying rooted through conditions he would never have chosen. So here's the answer to the question we opened with. The strength in Philippians 4:13 is not willpower borrowed from God. It's the Spirit, the gift of the indwelling Christ, growing inside Paul's weakness, a contentment Paul could not have produced on his best day. And here's the part the coffee mug can't hold. The chain did not have to come off for that to happen. The cell was never the thing blocking the fruit. The cell was the soil it grew in. And once you see that, the same shape turns up all over Scripture. Strength on the inside, while the hard thing stays exactly where it is. Habakkuk watches his whole world come apart. No blossom on the fig tree, no fruit on the vine, no herd left in the stall. The life of his entire nation collapsing around him. Nothing gets fixed, and from inside that room, and he says the strangest thing: "Yet I will rejoice in the Lord." The vines stayed bare. The joy grew anyway. Paul, writing to Corinth, remembers a season in Asia so crushing that he despaired even of life. He doesn't tell us God lifted it on schedule. He tells us what it was for. It came so that he would stop relying on himself and lean on the God who raises the dead. The weight didn't move. What moved was where his weight rested. And then there's the garden. Jesus, on the worst night, was asking whether the cup could pass. The Father's answer isn't removal, no rescue squad, no early exit. There's presence and there's strength to walk straight into the thing he'd asked to avoid. The cross wasn't canceled. He was carried through it. 3 lives, 1 shape. Every single time the strength shows up not as an exit but as a presence. And the chain, the bare vine, the cup, stays right where it is. The passage turns on a distinction most readings rush right past. We keep asking God to break the chain. Scripture keeps showing us a God who far more often puts strength inside the person while the chain stays on. Paul knew that one personally. He once begged God 3 times to take away a specific torment, a thorn, he called it. And the answer that came back wasn't relief. It was this: "My grace is enough for you, because my power works best in weakness, not around the weakness, in it." Centuries later, the pastor John Owen spent much of his life on one question: how the strength of God actually gets inside an ordinary person. His answer never changed. Not technique, not trying harder. The quiet interior work of the Spirit, doing in a person what that person could never do alone. So that's the whole architecture. Not strength instead of weakness. Strength inside it, which means the motivational version had it backwards. It treated weakness as the enemy of the verse, the thing to push through on the way to strength. But weakness isn't the obstacle here. It's the address. It's where the Spirit shows up to grow what he grows. The empty column was never proof that the verse failed. The empty column is where the fruit was always going to come from. And that lands on something tender, something the highlight reel reading never has to face. Because if contentment is fruit, then it can't be rushed, and it can't be faked, and it can't be summoned by wanting it badly enough. It grows on its own clock, in soil nobody would choose. Which raises the most personal question this verse asks: the one that's been waiting quietly for anyone who has tried and still feels weak. A woman sits in her car in the church parking lot, engine off, a few extra minutes because she's about to walk in and sing words she isn't sure she feels anymore. A man prays the same prayer for 9 years and slowly stops expecting the phone to ring. This is a particular kind of tired, the kind that doesn't show up on anyone's face, the quiet, private exhaustion of someone who has done everything right and still feels like they're failing at the one thing that was supposed to come easily by now: peace, contentment, trust, and underneath it, almost always, the same accusing question: what's wrong with me? If you are watching this and you've been carrying that question, if you've prayed and the answer was a flat no, if the diagnosis didn't reverse, if the marriage didn't mend, if the silence from heaven has stretched so long you've started to wonder whether your faith was ever real, then this is the part that was written for you. Because here is what the highlight reel reading did to you. It handed you a verse and told you the strength was yours to generate. Pray harder, believe bigger, feel more content. And when the contentment didn't come on command, you did the only thing that reading leaves room for. You blamed yourself. You read the gap between the promise and your experience as a measure of how weak your faith must be. But look again at the man who wrote it. Paul says he learned contentment, learned past tense, over time, through seasons, which means there were seasons he hadn't learned it yet, stretches where the fruit wasn't ripe. And even here, at the end, writing this letter, he isn't on a stage. He's in a cell, still in need, still thanking friends for a gift he depended on. The most content man in this letter is writing with the chain still on his wrist. So hear this carefully. The weakness you keep apologizing for is not the evidence that the verse failed in you. It's the soil the verse always meant to grow in. Think about what that does to the timeline you've been beating yourself up over. Fruit doesn't ripen on a schedule you can set. You can't stand over an orchard in March and demand apples by Friday. The waiting that feels like failure is very often just the growing season you can't see yet. The root is working. It works underground, in the dark, in the cell, where nothing looks like progress and no one is watching. That's why the motivational version collapses in the exact room where it's needed most. It collapses because it asked you to manufacture, by force, the one thing that only ever comes as fruit. It told you to squeeze an apple out of a branch. No wonder you're exhausted. You've been trying to do the Spirit's slow work with your own 2 hands, and then reading the blisters as proof of your unbelief. Set that down. You were never the source. You were always the branch. And a branch doesn't strain. It stays. It stays connected through the dry season and the dark one, and it lets the root do the work the branch was never going to manage on its own. That's not laziness. It's the hardest thing a tired person ever does, to stop earning, to simply abide. And here is the mercy hiding in that. If the strength was never yours to produce, then your hardest seasons were never disqualifying you. The years you'd file away as wasted, the prayers you'd long since marked unanswered, the stretches where you felt nothing and showed up anyway, those were not proof that you were failing the verse. They may have been the exact soil the verse was quietly working in the whole time, back when you were sure nothing was happening at all. This isn't a call to try harder. It's almost the opposite. It's permission to stop performing strength and start receiving it. To bring the empty column to God exactly as it is, not cleaned up, not resolved, not finally peaceful, and to let Him grow what you couldn't. Scripture won't promise you the chain falls off tomorrow. It makes a stranger, sturdier promise that God does His quietest, deepest work in exactly this kind of weakness, not on the highlight reel, in the cell, in the waiting. And the contentment that so many believers have spent years failing to fake is the very thing the Spirit is patient enough to grow slowly in soil no one would ever choose. So the question was never really, what's wrong with you? The question is whether you'll let the strength come from where it was always meant to come from, not from you, through you, from the one who moved toward you while the chain was still on. Somewhere right now, a person is sitting with a chain that hasn't come off, a bill that won't stop coming, a grief that hasn't lifted, a door that stays shut no matter how hard they pray at it. The verse on the mug has nothing left to say in that room, but the verse Paul actually wrote does. He never promised the chain would fall. He promised someone in the cell, strength that doesn't wait for the door to open, joy that doesn't ask permission from the circumstances. Contentment grows by a spirit who does his deepest work in soil no one would choose. You were never meant to be the strength. You were meant to be the branch it runs through. That's not a smaller verse than the one you were handed. It's an immeasurably bigger one, so if you know someone sitting in the empty column tonight, send them the real one, not the poster. The promise.